This is where we get off, Mom, he said, voice flat, steering the car to the side of a winding mountain road. What do you mean? Why are we stopping here? I asked, confused and tired after my husband's funeral. He didn't look at me. Get out, he snapped. I don't understand, I whispered. Get out of my car, he shouted. My hands trembled as I opened the door. But where will I go? I pleaded. Not my problem, he said coldly. As the car sped off, dust choked me. I stood there, alone, betrayed, tears cutting through the dirt on my cheeks. Memories flooded me, the nights I stayed up nursing him, the dreams I sacrificed, the love I gave unconditionally. And now this was how he repaid me? I stumbled into the wilderness, hoping for a miracle. 2 days later, dehydrated and collapsing, an old man in a rusty mini truck appeared from nowhere, and saved my life. If you're still listening, hit that subscribe button. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? My name is Charlotte Ann Miller. I'm 68 years old. A widow. A mother. Once, I was the kind of woman who always made sure everyone had a plate at the table, even strangers. I kept my house warm, clean, filled with homemade food and laughter. I was the woman who stayed up night after night, cradling my son Nathan through his asthma attacks, reading him bedtime stories about dragons and astronauts. And now? I stood alone on a cracked mountain road in the middle of nowhere, watching the dust from my son's car settle over my shoes. I couldn't make sense of it. Just hours ago, we were burying David, my husband of 43 years. I was still wearing black. Still carrying his folded flag in my lap. 1 minute we were on our way back from the funeral. The next, Nathan had pulled over and said, "This is where we get off, Mom." He didn't even say goodbye. My legs shook as I stepped out of the car. The silence around me was heavy, the air thick with the scent of pine and old dirt. No cars. No voices. No cell signal. Just the wind in the trees. I called out his name. Once. Twice. Nothing. My voice just disappeared into the hills. With every painful step, memories clawed their way back into my mind. David teaching Nathan how to fish. Nathan's chubby little hands holding mine on the first day of school. Me pawning my grandmother's necklace to help pay for his college books. I gave him everything. And he left me to die. I walked for what felt like miles. The sun climbed high, then began to sink. My feet ached. My mouth dried out. There was no shelter, no water. I followed the gravel road until it faded into brush. I started to see things, David standing by a tree, holding out his hand. Nathan, running to me as a boy, smiling. But none of it was real. By the time the sun dipped behind the mountains, I couldn't feel my fingers. My knees buckled. I collapsed to the ground, scraping my palms on gravel. My breath came in shallow gasps. Is this it? I whispered to the dark. Is this how I go? The stars spun above me. My limbs gave out. I laid there, my cheek pressed against the dirt, waiting to disappear into the cold. Just as I began to lose consciousness near the edge of a ravine, I heard it, a faint rumble. An engine. Getting closer. At first, I thought the engine noise was in my head, a cruel echo sent by the wilderness. But it grew louder. Realer. Tires crushed gravel. Then stopped. I wanted to lift my head, but I couldn't. Everything was heavy. My eyelids. My thoughts. My body. Then footsteps. Crunching leaves. A man's voice, gruff but not unkind. Ma'am? Can you hear me? I tried to respond. All I could manage was the tiniest nod. Maybe a grunt. A few more seconds and I felt arms beneath me, steady, calloused hands lifting me like I weighed nothing. He smelled like wood smoke and old leather. I remember a worn flannel brushing against my cheek as he carried me. "You're all right," he whispered. "I got you now." He set me into the passenger seat of an old pickup. Rusted dashboard. Worn upholstery. The kind of truck that had stories to tell. The world outside blurred past the window as he drove. Forest. Shadows. Curves in the road. I drifted in and out of awareness, catching flashes of his face, a gray beard, deep wrinkles, eyes that had seen loss but hadn't hardened from it. The truck finally rumbled to a stop. Doors opened. Arms again. Then warmth. Wood under my back. The scent of pine needles and fire soot. A quilt tucked around me. Darkness pulled me under before I could thank him. I woke up slowly. My throat burned. My lips cracked when I moved them. I was in a room, small, wooden, clean. Not fancy, but safe. A fireplace glowed quietly. Rain tapped against the windows. And I was alive. Next to me, a chipped mug of water. And a note scribbled in pencil. "You're safe. I'll be back before sundown, Elijah." That was the first time I saw his name. I sipped the water and looked around. Whoever Elijah was, he'd saved me. Not just from death, but from disappearing without a trace. And in that moment, I didn't even know why he stopped. But I knew this: without him, I'd be nothing more than a memory Nathan never planned to speak of again. I pulled the quilt tighter around me and closed my eyes, just as the cabin door creaked open, and I met Elijah for the first time. The door creaked open. I tensed, pulling the quilt up like armor. He stepped inside, his boots making slow, measured thuds across the wooden floor. In the dim light, I saw him fully for the first time: broad frame, flannel shirt, gray beard, and eyes that held too many winters. He was carrying a bundle of kindling under one arm and a metal kettle in the other. "You're awake," he said, setting the wood near the fireplace. I tried to sit up straighter. "Yes. Thank you for saving me." He gave me a nod, not awkward, not proud. Just honest. "You were nearly gone. Lucky I came that way. I usually don't." His voice was like a worn-down stream, quiet, persistent, never forced. "I'm Charlotte," I said. "Charlotte Miller." He looked at me for a long second. Then the smallest flicker of something, recognition, crossed his face. "Miller," he repeated. "You any relation to David Miller? Used to own the orchard out by Route 9? I blinked. "He was my husband." Elijah didn't say anything for a while. Just stirred something on the stove. Then, small world. I didn't press. I was too tired. Too full of questions already. He poured 2 mugs of tea and handed one to me. It smelled like pine needles and mint. We sat in silence, steam rising between us like a quiet treaty. The cabin was simple. A bookshelf with worn titles. A radio on the windowsill. Cast iron pans hanging on the wall. Everything felt lived in, cared for. It was the kind of place people run to when they've stopped waiting to be found. "Are you alone here?" I finally asked. "Been that way a long time," he said. "And you just picked me up out of nowhere?" He looked at the fire. "Felt like I was supposed to." We didn't talk about Nathan. Or David. or why I had been left to die on a back road in the mountains. I think he knew I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Later, as he stood to throw another log into the fire, something slipped from his back pocket. A photo. It fluttered to the floor. I bent down and picked it up. A woman smiled back at me, early 40s, maybe. Kind face. Laugh lines. Wind in her hair. But what made my hand tremble was the necklace she wore. Silver chain. Sapphire pendant. The exact one David had given me on our 25th anniversary. I looked up at Elijah, photo still in my hand. Who is she? He turned slowly. His eyes softened. That's my wife. Rachel. She passed 12 years ago. I stared at the picture. The necklace. My mind ran loops trying to make sense of it. That necklace, I said, barely above a whisper. I have one just like it. David, he gave it to me. Elijah took the photo from my hand gently. Looked at it for a long moment. Funny how life circles back sometimes, he murmured. We said no more about it. But something had shifted. Something unspoken but weighty. Maybe kindness didn't come from who shared your blood. Maybe it came from who shared your pain. The next morning, I found Elijah outside tuning an old radio, just in time to hear a reporter say my name, and that my son was looking for me. I didn't sleep much that night. My body was still healing, but it was my mind that wouldn't stop running. That necklace in the photo. It wasn't just similar. It was identical to mine. Same cut. Same clasp. Same stone David saved for weeks to afford. What were the chances? When I woke up, Elijah was already outside, fiddling with something on the porch. The morning air was crisp and still damp from the night's rain. I wrapped the quilt around my shoulders and stepped out slowly. He was hunched over a dusty radio the size of a toolbox, its metal casing dented and rusted. He cranked it with one hand while adjusting the antenna with the other. You're up early, he said without looking at me. I couldn't sleep. Yeah, he nodded. Me neither. Weather's messing with the signal, but this old girl still sings sometimes. He turned a knob, and static filled the air. For a while, it was nothing but white noise and distant flickers of sound. Then, as he adjusted the dial just slightly, a voice broke through. Local authorities are still searching for Charlotte Ann Miller, the 68-year-old widow presumed missing after her husband's funeral last week. My breath caught. Son Nathan Miller is pleading with the public for any information. I stepped back like I'd been slapped. My name. My full name. Broadcast across a mountain radio frequency. I looked at Elijah. He didn't flinch. He's looking for you, he said flatly. He left me to die, I whispered. Why would he? Elijah turned the radio off. Because you've got something he wants. That's the only reason people like him come looking. I sat on the edge of the porch, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. He said, nothing. No goodbye. No guilt. Just left me there like I was some broken chair on the curb. My voice cracked. And now he wants to find me? Elijah crouched next to me, placing a hand on the railing, not on me. Do you want to be found? I didn't answer. Not right away. Later that afternoon, as we shelled beans by the fireplace, I asked about the photo again. Rachel, I said. Tell me about her. He paused. Picked up a bean pod. She was my everything. I was nobody when she met me. A teacher with bad pay, no savings, and no charm. But she saw something in me. How did she die? Pancreatic cancer. Fast. Brutal. Took her in under 6 months. I nodded, not needing to ask more. Then I asked the real question. How did she get that necklace? Elijah looked at me. It was a gift. Came from a friend she used to know, years before me. David? I said softly. He paused. Then nodded. Small world, I whispered. He stared at the fire. Too small sometimes. It was quiet for a long time. She wore it every day, he finally said. Right up until she couldn't anymore. I reached under my shirt and pulled out my own necklace. The same one. Same color. Same story. What had David not told me? Had he loved her once? Had he bought two? Or had he recycled a memory? I didn't know whether to be angry, sad, or just tired. But one thing was clear, my past was more tangled than I realized. And my son? He wasn't mourning me. He was chasing something. Elijah turned to me with a serious look. Charlotte, there's something else you need to hear. I have a friend, a lawyer. He just got word your son is trying to sell your husband's land. Elijah didn't waste time. He brought out an old satellite phone and stepped outside the cabin, where signal sometimes flickered through the treetops. I watched him from the window, pacing slowly, his voice low but firm. When he came back inside, he placed the phone on the table between us. I spoke to a friend of mine, he said. A lawyer who handles land and title disputes. He just got looped into something he thought you should know. I stared at him, heart already bracing for the blow. Your son, Elijah continued, has filed a petition to have you declared legally dead. The words didn't make sense at first. Declared dead? So soon? He's claiming you vanished after the funeral. That there's no sign of you anywhere, Elijah said. He's telling the court you were mentally unstable. That you wandered off. My mouth went dry. But that's not the worst part, he added. He's trying to sell your land. The 5-acre lot off Hawthorne Ridge. I blinked. That land belonged to David. He worked half his life to keep it. He said it would be for our retirement. Elijah nodded. Except David changed the deed before he passed. He transferred it into your name. Quietly. No one knew. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my palm to my chest like that would stop the heartache from pouring out. Nathan knew. He must have found out after David's death, maybe while going through the papers. And now he was doing what vultures do, circling. Is it even legal? I asked. To declare someone dead in less than a week? No. But your son's working fast. Fast enough to make trouble before the truth catches up. I stood slowly, pacing the wooden floor. He's not even grieving me. Not for a second. He just wants the land. Elijah stayed quiet, letting me unravel on my own terms. That night, I sat outside on the porch, staring at the stars that blinked above the treetops. I thought about the baby I had once cradled in my arms. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The young man I sent off to college with every penny I could find. And now, he wanted me erased. But the land was in my name. And I wasn't dead. Not yet. The next morning, Elijah handed me a pen and a lined notebook. You'll need to write down everything you remember. Dates. Documents. Conversations with David. Anything that helps prove who you are and what he intended. I nodded and got to work, writing through shaking hands. Meanwhile, Elijah's lawyer friend, Harrison, began preparing to file a legal hold on the land transfer. But he needed one thing first, a formal statement that I was alive. Problem was, I had no ID. No phone. No trace. I had been erased. Or so my son thought. Harrison called again. We've bought you 2 days. But Nathan's not waiting. He's already scheduled a signing with the buyer. He thinks you're buried or eaten by coyotes. If we don't act fast, your name will be stripped from that deed, for good. I never thought I'd be trying to prove I was alive. But here I was, in a borrowed flannel shirt, sitting at a cabin table with a pen in my hand, documenting my own existence. Every name. Every date. Every piece of evidence I could recall that connected me to the land David and I had built our lives on. I remembered David's habits, how he'd always double-file things. One copy in the fire safe, one hidden where no one would look. I even remembered the last argument we had about Nathan. David was angry, quietly, but deeply. He's changed, Char, he had said. You see it too. He's not building a life. He's positioning for an inheritance. Back then, I didn't want to believe it. I had told him not to be so cynical. That Nathan was just under pressure, that he and Amber were struggling to make ends meet. But now? I saw what David had seen. He knew something, I said aloud, scribbling in my notebook. Elijah looked up. What do you mean? I think David suspected Nathan might try something after he died. That's why he transferred the land to me, quietly. Elijah nodded slowly. Then he gave you the last move. We spent that morning digging through every scrap of memory I could muster, family records, social security numbers, the day we bought the land, and where we kept the original deed. We even hand-drew the layout of the house, the garage, the tree we planted when Nathan turned 5. Elijah used his satellite phone again to contact Harrison, the lawyer. I sat nearby, trying not to pace. He's filing an emergency injunction, Elijah said after hanging up. But we need an affidavit. A notarized statement from you. But there's no notary for Miles, I said. I know a guy, he replied. Lives 2 towns over. He owes me a favor. Just before sundown, we prepared to head out. But before we could leave, Elijah paused and turned back to me. There's something else, he said, eyes serious. Harrison just found out your son's filed an obituary. I froze. What? It ran in a small local paper this morning. It says you died of grief, after wandering off into the mountains. My knees buckled. Elijah caught me by the elbow. Nathan's not wasting time, he said. He's making sure people believe you're gone. He's already burying me, I whispered. I walked outside to breathe. The mountain air bit at my lungs, but I needed it. I stood under the growing darkness and looked out at the trees that had become my guardians. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about identity. About truth. I wasn't going to let my son write the final chapter of my life before I'd had a chance to tell it myself. Elijah's phone buzzed again. Harrison's voice was urgent. Nathan scheduled a memorial service for tomorrow. At the family church. After that, the sale goes through. I always thought the day I'd be memorialized would come long after I was ready for it, not as a weapon used by my own son. But there it was, my name, printed on the church bulletin, under the heading In Loving Memory of Charlotte and Miller. Elijah parked the truck a quarter-mile from the church lot. We watched from the tree line. Cars pulled in one after another, neighbors, old friends, distant relatives, and of course, Amber. Perfect in her black dress, dabbing fake tears with tissue she didn't need. And then I saw Nathan. He stood on the church steps, holding a framed photo of me. I watched him adjust his tie. He didn't look sad. He looked tense. Focused. Inside that church, people were weeping. Whispering stories about me. Saying how kind I had been. How no one knew what really happened after David's funeral. And Nathan stood there accepting their grief like a man who had actually lost someone. I wanted to scream. Elijah placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Not yet," he said. "Let the wolf feel safe before you show him the trap." So we stayed hidden. From the woods, I watched Amber speak. She read a poem. Cried through it. Nathan pulled her close. People were moved. None of them knew that just 7 days ago, he left me on a mountain road to rot. None of them knew this was all a performance to close a sale on land that didn't belong to him. By the end of the ceremony, I was shaking. Not with grief, but fury. Elijah handed me a thermos of tea. "Tomorrow," he said. "We stop it." That night, I sat by the fire, staring at the necklace around my neck. My name had been spoken in past tense. My life, mourned while I was still breathing. I wrote a letter. Not to Nathan. To myself. To the woman I used to be, the mother who believed love could fix anything, that children don't forget sacrifice, that family comes first. She deserved better. The woman I was becoming knew that survival didn't come from loyalty, it came from truth. The next morning, Elijah's phone buzzed. It was Harrison. "He's meeting the developer today. Noon sharp. The final deed transfer is happening at the county office." I closed my notebook. Folded my coat. Pulled my hair into a bun like my mother used to. "Then we'll be there," I said. Alive and walking. Elijah loaded the truck. As we pulled onto the road, clouds gathered over the ridge, thick and gray. A storm was coming. We hit the road early. The wind was already picking up, brushing leaves across the winding path like warning signals from the mountain itself. I held my paperwork tight in my lap, my written affidavit, my statement of survival, and the notarized document Elijah had helped me secure the night before. They weren't just papers. They were my name, my life, my voice. The lawyer, Harrison, had arranged to meet us in town by noon. That gave us 4 hours. More than enough, if nature allowed it. But nature had its own story to tell that day. The skies darkened before we were even halfway down the mountain. Rain tapped the windshield at first, then pelted it like gravel. Elijah leaned forward, squinting through the blur. "Storm's early," he muttered. "They said evening. This is not evening." I stayed quiet, clenching the seat. The road narrowed. Trees leaned in. We passed no one. It was as if the mountain had swallowed the world whole and left us moving through its throat. And then, it happened. A fallen tree. Massive. Blocking the road like a final test. "Damn," Elijah whispered. He stepped out, rain soaking him in seconds. I watched from inside as he tried to shift the tree. It didn't budge. When he climbed back in, he looked at me, grim. "There's a side trail. Not much more than a logging path. It'll get us down, if we're lucky." "And if we're not?" He didn't answer. The trail was barely wide enough for the truck. Branches clawed at the windows. Mud sucked at the tires. My thoughts drifted to Nathan, sitting in a government office, tie straight, pen in hand, ready to sign away what didn't belong to him. I imagined Amber beside him, playing the grieving daughter-in-law. I wondered if either of them ever thought about where they left me. If they saw my face in their sleep. If guilt ever whispered in their ears at night. But I knew the answer. Halfway down the trail, the truck jolted hard, right rear tire sunk into a rut. Elijah cursed. Shifted gears. The engine roared. The wheel spun uselessly. We were stuck. For a moment, we just sat there. Rain drumming hard now. Thunder low and steady. I'm walking, I said, gripping the door handle. You're not strong enough, Elijah warned. I'm not dead either. He looked at me. Nodded once. We packed what we could into a canvas bag, documents, ID, the statement. Then we stepped into the storm. The walk was brutal. Mud tugged at our boots. Branches clawed at our clothes. The wind screamed through the trees like it wanted to push us back. But we kept going. Every step reminded me, I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a story. I was a woman. Flesh. Breath. Intention. I didn't survive to be erased. We walked for 2 miles before the forest thinned. A narrow paved road emerged like a blessing. And just then, a low rumble behind us. A ranger truck. Orange lights flashing. Elijah waved it down like his arm was on fire. The ranger rolled down the window. You two all right? I stepped forward. Sir. I need to get to Asheville courthouse. Now. He blinked. Lady, you look like you just walked out of a grave. I nodded. Exactly. As the ranger stepped on the gas, Elijah turned to me. You ready for this? I looked ahead, at the road rising to meet us. Let's bring me back from the dead. The ranger's truck was warm inside, but my clothes were soaked through. I didn't care. The cabin's heater blasted. My fingers tingled back to life. Beside me, Elijah sat in silence, but I could see his jaw twitching. He hated being unprepared. Hated being outpaced by chaos. But there was no shame in what we'd done. We walked through a mountain in a storm. We did not give up. Radio's out, the ranger said. That storm knocked out most of the local towers. But if your lawyer's waiting, we'll get you there. What's your name? I asked. Brenner, he said, glancing at me. Matt Brenner. County Forest Patrol. Thank you, Officer Brenner. He gave a small smile. You're lucky. Most folks don't make it off Miller's Gap this time of year. I wasn't planning to, I said. Until I had a reason. I leaned my head against the cool window glass and stared out. Trees blurred. Fog drifted between the ridges. The storm still snarled in the sky above us like it wasn't finished yet. My thoughts slipped back to David. I remembered our last dinner. He had seemed distant, quiet, always watching Nathan. Something was bothering him, but he never said what. The next week, he collapsed in the orchard. The doctors said heart failure. Stress, they said. I never questioned it, until now. Do you think Nathan had something to do with David's death? I asked suddenly. Elijah turned to me, but it was Officer Brenner who answered first. I don't know your son, he said, but I know when people start erasing others for land, they've usually erased their conscience long before. I swallowed. That felt too true. 20 minutes out from Asheville, Brenner's radio crackled to life. Copy that, county clerk confirms, transfer signing is in progress. Developers on site. Buyer presented partial ownership papers. Still no sign of Charlotte Miller. I looked at Elijah. My hands curled into fists. He's doing it. Right now. Elijah leaned forward. Tell them to delay. Tell them Charlotte Miller is in this truck and she's alive. But the radio crackled and died again. Signal's gone. You've got one shot, Brenner said. When we get there, you walk in with your head high. We pulled into Asheville just after noon. The storm had split, but the clouds still hovered like angry witnesses. As the courthouse came into view, my heart rattled against my ribs. I could already see the black SUVs, the white Range Rover with Amber's vanity plate, the sleek silver car that had to belong to the developer. People were already inside. The papers were probably already on the table. I stepped out of the truck. My boots hit the wet pavement with weight. Elijah grabbed my wrist gently. You don't have to do this alone. I'm not, I said, and squeezed his hand. We reached the courthouse steps. A man in a suit, late 30s, glasses, frantic, rushed toward us. Harrison. Thank God, he breathed. They're inside. I stalled, but I can't hold them much longer. He handed me a dry blazer and a manila envelope. Inside, proof of identity, the affidavit, and notarized documentation confirming my legal ownership of the land. We moved fast. Through the marble doors. Past the shocked receptionist. Into the back conference room. And there they were. Nathan. Amber. The developer. Two notaries. Amber's eyes widened first. Nathan froze. The pen dropped from his fingers. Hello, I said. Hope I'm not interrupting. Nathan's lips parted, but no sound came out. The notary stood up slowly. Harrison placed the envelope on the table. Charlotte Miller is alive. And she's here to stop this. The room held its breath. No one spoke at first. The notary looked between me and the death certificate on the table like reality had split in two. Amber backed away like she'd seen a ghost. Nathan? He just stared. Pale. Still. Like a man watching the house he built on lies finally catch fire. I walked up slowly, took the pen off the table, and looked my son in the eye. You tried to bury me, I said. But I dig deep. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Mom, I thought you were. Don't, I snapped. Don't insult what's left of your soul with more lies. Harrison handed the documents to the county representative. These confirm legal ownership of the land remains with Mrs. Charlotte Miller. Alive and well. The rep flipped through the pages, then looked to the notary. The notary nodded. That voids the transfer, the clerk said. This meeting's over. The developer groaned and slammed his briefcase shut. You said she was dead, he growled at Nathan. I thought she was, Nathan stammered. I thought? I repeated. Or you hoped? Amber stepped forward. Charlotte, we didn't mean for things to. Save it, I said. I've heard better acting at school plays. Security entered. Not for me. For Nathan. Because Harrison had made another call on our ride over. A quiet one, to the sheriff's office. Two officers stepped forward. Nathan Miller, one said, you're being detained for suspected fraud and falsifying legal documents under Title 14 to 122. Amber burst into tears. Nathan's face crumpled. You're arresting me? For trying to claim land that was mine to begin with? I stepped forward, calm as ice. It was never yours. David put it in my name for a reason. Nathan stared at me, eyes wide. You think he didn't force that? You think he didn't fear what you'd do with it? Better than watching you poison it for profit. He lunged toward me, officers caught him mid-step. As he was dragged out of the courthouse, he shouted over his shoulder, "You'll regret this. All of it." I didn't flinch. But Elijah reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "there's something else you need to see." Back at Elijah's cabin, the storm had passed, but inside me, something darker still churned. Nathan was in custody. Amber had disappeared, her phone turned off, her social media wiped. Harrison told me she'd likely try to pin everything on Nathan. It should have felt like closure. It didn't. Because the truth had cracks. And Elijah held something that might shatter everything. That evening, he placed the USB drive on the cabin table like it was an unexploded bomb. "I didn't want to show you this unless I had to," he said, "but I think you do." The file was simple, a folder titled David M. Inside, 7 email threads. All from David. All addressed to Elijah. All sent in the 3 months before David died. I clicked open the first one. The subject line read, "Need advice, family trouble. I don't know who my son is anymore. He's different. Quiet. Cold. I caught him going through our safe when he thought I was asleep." I blinked. Scrolled down. "Amber thinks I don't see it, but she's the one whispering poison in his ear. I'm getting weaker, Eli. I feel it. I think they're waiting for me to die." The third email made my blood run cold. "I've changed the deed. I'm putting it all in Charlotte's name. She won't believe me if I tell her why. But I trust her more than I trust my own blood." I sat in silence. "Elijah, why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I thought maybe Nathan was just scared. Grieving. People do dumb things when they panic. But after what he did, how far he went, he trailed off." The final email was dated just 4 days before David died. "If anything happens to me, watch out for her. Please. Promise me." I covered my mouth. Tears welled up, but they didn't fall. David had known. He didn't die naive. He died protecting me. Later that night, Harrison called. "The sheriff's office will hold Nathan overnight. Charges are pending. But he'll likely post bail by morning." "He'll come for me," I said. "He won't find you. But I want him to." I returned to Asheville the next morning, not for vengeance. For finality. I walked to the church, the same one that hosted my fake funeral, and stepped inside. It was quiet. Empty. I sat in the very front pew and whispered into the air. "I forgive you, David. For not telling me. For carrying it all alone." Then I lit a candle, not for Nathan. For myself. For the version of me that stayed silent too long. As I stepped out of the church, a reporter was waiting by the steps. "Mrs. Miller, is it true you came back from the dead to stop your own memorial?" I stared into the camera and said, "I never left. I was just no longer seen." The courtroom wasn't like it is in the movies. No gasps, no slamming gavels. Just paperwork, stale air, and people pretending their faces don't show judgment. I sat in the second row, hands folded tightly in my lap, as they brought Nathan in wearing a borrowed suit and the expression of a man who still thought charm could fix things. He didn't look at me. Amber wasn't there. Her lawyer had filed a statement declaring her not mentally stable enough to attend the hearing. Convenient. Harrison leaned over to me. "There's enough to move forward. Charges include attempted fraud, false reporting, perjury, and obstruction. If we push for sentencing, he could face real time." I nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the front of the courtroom. Then the clerk read my name. Charlotte and Miller, would you like to speak as the victim in this case? I rose. The room shifted. Every ear turned toward me, expecting anger. Maybe vengeance. But I was done with vengeance. I walked slowly to the front and looked at the judge, not at my son. My name is Charlotte Miller, I began. And I'm here today because someone tried to bury me. Not just in papers and lies, but in silence. I paused. The judge watched. So did the jury. My son declared me dead before my hands were cold from grief. And he did it not because he believed I was gone, but because he hoped it. Still, I didn't look at Nathan. I've had time to think about what justice means. And I've come to a strange conclusion. I finally turned. There's no sentence you could serve that would restore what you took from me. But there's one that will hurt more than bars. Silence. I want you to walk out of here free, Nathan. But I want you to know this, your freedom is a gift I give you today. One you didn't earn. One you don't deserve. And you will carry the weight of knowing your mother let you go. Gasps this time. Small ones. The judge cleared his throat. Are you withdrawing the victim's statement of intent to prosecute? I am. The judge nodded. Charges will be dropped, but the record will remain. Harrison touched my arm lightly. I turned and walked back to my seat, lighter somehow, not because Nathan deserved mercy, but because I did. After the hearing, Nathan approached me in the hallway. Not close, just close enough to speak. I never wanted it to go that far, he said. I stared at him. You were always going to go that far. You just didn't expect me to survive. No, I cut in. You don't get more words. You get a life. Live it. But never show your face to me again. I walked away. I didn't look back. Outside, Elijah waited in the truck. As I climbed in, he handed me an envelope. This came for you at the cabin. Inside was a letter, with handwriting I hadn't seen in over 40 years. My mother's. The letter was real. A faded envelope, edges curled, paper soft from age. Addressed in my mother's delicate script, Charlotte and Miller. I opened it slowly, half expecting it to disintegrate. Elijah sat silently beside me in the truck, letting me take whatever time I needed. Inside was a single sheet. Handwritten. Slanted ink. The voice of a woman I hadn't heard in decades. If you ever reach a point where the world turns on you, I hope you remember this, there is more strength in mercy than there ever was in fury. People will take. They will hurt. Sometimes even your own blood. But don't let them make you bitter. Bitterness is how they keep living inside you. You let go, and you win. You walk away, and they stay trapped in the fire they built for you. I folded the letter. I didn't cry. I smiled. Elijah and I drove back to the cabin, the road finally clear. Leaves shimmered in sunlight. The rain had washed everything clean. I didn't know your mother had written to you, Elijah said. I didn't either. My cousin must have sent it after hearing about Nathan. Said it had been in her attic for years. I guess things wait for us until we're ready to read them. He was right. Over the next few days, I received letters from neighbors, townspeople, and even strangers. The story had made local headlines: widow returns from the dead to stop son's land scam. People were calling it courageous, brave, miraculous. But I didn't feel any of those things. I just felt clear. One morning, I sat on the porch, sipping tea while Elijah carved wood. He handed me a small figure, a tiny bird. Red cardinal, he said. My wife used to say they were messengers. It's beautiful, I whispered, holding it in my palm. I think Rachel would have liked you, he said. I smiled. I think David would have liked you. That evening, we made a quiet fire and watched the stars rise. I thought about Nathan. About Amber. About how much love I'd poured into my family, and how little had come back in the end. And yet, I didn't regret it. Because love isn't always about what you get back. It's about who you are while you're giving it. The next day, I went back to the courthouse one last time. Not to revisit the past, but to sign something new. I amended my will. The land, David's land, my land, would go not to blood, but to soul. Half would be protected forest. The other half? Community gardens. A space for women escaping abusive homes. A shelter. A starting point. Elijah helped me draw the boundary lines. What about the house? He asked. I looked at him. I'll build another. But not alone. As we walked the property together, mapping the future, Elijah reached into his pocket. One more thing, he said, placing a worn envelope in my hand. Rachel left this behind. For the woman I'd one day meet. I think she meant you. The letter from Rachel was short. No name. No date. Just 2 lines, written in flowing, hopeful script. If you find yourself alone, don't stay that way. Goodness needs good company. Share yours. I folded it and pressed it to my chest. Elijah didn't say a word. He didn't need to. We returned to the land, David's land, on a clear, crisp morning. The same stretch of property Nathan once tried to sell off was now mine to walk freely. But I wasn't thinking about boundaries anymore. I was thinking about beginnings. Half the orchard was still intact. A few of the old apple trees had survived storms, neglect, time. I ran my hand along one of them, bark peeling, but roots deep. We'll keep this one, I said. You always were the stubborn type, Elijah smirked. And you kept picking up strangers on back roads. Seems like we both got our flaws. He laughed. That laugh, I'd come to depend on it more than I wanted to admit. We started clearing the lot a few days later. The developer had left behind plans, mock-ups of luxury cabins and driveways. I burned them in a metal barrel behind the old garage. Let the wind take them. Instead, I drafted my own plans. An open plot for a greenhouse. A small shelter house. Rows of vegetable beds. Spaces that didn't need ownership, they needed intention. I called Harrison and filed for a trust. This land, I told him, will feed more than just memory. The old house, though, David's house, was unsalvageable. Weather, neglect, and grief had hollowed it. One strong gust and it might have fallen on its own. So I did it myself. I called the demolition crew. And I watched every wall fall, one by one, until it was just dust and echoes. But I kept the front door. The one we walked through on our wedding night. The one Nathan had slammed as a teenager. The one David had painted deep red because he said it felt hopeful. That door now leans against the fence post outside Elijah's cabin. A marker of what once was. A reminder that I came through it, and walked back out again. By spring, the garden started to grow. Children came to plant sunflowers. Women from the shelter dug trenches for peas and tomatoes. A local teacher brought her class every Thursday. I was no longer the woman who came back from the dead. I was Charlotte, the one who hands out lemonade and shovels and sometimes tells stories under the porch awning. Stories about storms. About sons. About freedom. And Elijah? He stayed. Or maybe I stayed with him. It didn't matter who owned what anymore. We started building a new cabin on the edge of the old orchard. Smaller. Warmer. Ours. No ghosts inside, just hand-carved shelves, mismatched mugs, and a rocking chair where I now read novels I never had time for when I was someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's fading name in a ledger. On the porch that evening, Elijah handed me a box. Inside, wrapped in old cloth, was Rachel's wedding ring, and a note, for the woman who found him when I could not stay. I stared at Rachel's ring in my palm. The silver had dulled with time, but the meaning shimmered. There was no proposal. No grand gesture. Elijah simply sat beside me, eyes gentle, voice steady. I think Rachel always knew I wasn't meant to finish this life alone. And neither are you. I slid the ring into my pocket. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I finally understood something. Companionship doesn't always need ceremony. Sometimes it just needs showing up. And Elijah had always shown up. We moved into the new cabin before the first snow. Smaller than the old farmhouse. 1 bedroom. Open kitchen. A covered porch where we drank coffee every morning and whiskey every other night. The walls were filled with things we made, his carvings, my pressed flower frames, our stories. And laughter. A surprising amount of laughter, considering how much sorrow brought us here. I never saw Nathan again. Not in person. A year after the trial, I received a single envelope. No return address. Inside, a photo of him, older, thinner, standing outside a hardware store in another state. No note. No explanation. Just an image of a man who finally understood what it meant to lose everything. I didn't write back. But I didn't burn it, either. I tucked it into the same box that now held Rachel's ring, my mother's letter, and the key to the front door I tore from ashes. The garden grew wild that second year. Kids kept coming. Women, too. Teachers, nurses, strangers. We built a little shed filled with gloves and seeds. And every time someone asked who owned the land, I'd point to the orchard and say, "That tree. She does. We just work for her." Sometimes, Elijah would sit on the bench and strum a guitar Rachel left behind. He wasn't good, but he was honest. And that made every note feel like home. One afternoon, I walked to the edge of the woods, where the road curved, right near where Nathan once left me. I stood in that same spot. Same rocks. Same silence. But this time I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I had walked out of that place. Not just alive, but awake. And I hadn't walked alone. We grew old slowly. Softly. Together. I cooked less. He carved more. We argued about tomatoes and laughed over burned cornbread. We never married. We never needed to. We belonged. I came here to die. Instead, I started living.